Hello, everyone. I see that you're all just joining. We're going to get started here in a few minutes. This is the Bible Mandate webinar being held by Advance Oklahoma's Kids. So if you're looking for that webinar, you're in the right place. And we'll be here in just a moment. One of our panelists is having some technical difficulties, so we'll keep trying to get him online here in the background, but we'll be getting started here in about 1 minute. So thanks for being here.
Colleen, do you record or someone else push record?
It's recording right now.
Thanks.
And anyone who wants to tell us where they're from or what school they're joining from, you can put that into the chat box. And then also when we get started, there's a Q&A box there at the bottom. If you end up having questions for any of the panelists, you can put them there. And either we'll answer them during the public Q&A at the end, or we will answer them in the box. Oh, I'm getting the message that chat is disabled. So actually just put anything you need to put for the panelists into the Q&A. Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. It's 6:30. Thanks everyone for being here. I want to welcome everyone and thank you for attending this evening's webinar on the Bible Mandate in Oklahoma's public schools. This webinar is being put on by Advance Oklahoma's Kids. Advance Oklahoma's Kids, also known as AOK, is a statewide education coalition of organizations, parents, kids, and education leaders who want to work together to improve the quality of education for Oklahoma's kids. The coalition was launched in September of 2023, and we have hit the ground running ever since. AOK works on advocating for policy change that is rooted in what's best for Oklahoma's students. Webinars like this help us gauge community concerns and see what's happening in our schools. My name is Colleen McCarty, and I will be moderating this evening. I'm the Executive Director of Oklahoma Appleseed Center for Law and Justice. We are a public interest law center that works on issues of education justice, as well as criminal justice and election justice. Our goal for this evening is to hear from experienced religious and education leaders in our state about the new mandate on the Bible handed down by State Superintendent Walters on June 27th. At the State Board of Education meeting that day, Walters said he was sending a memo to every district superintendent with a directive that all schools had to incorporate the Bible in instruction for grades 5 through 12. It has been unclear what this will mean for teachers, parents, and administrators as we begin a new school year. Most schools that responded to the mandate basically stated they would not comply. So we've gathered religious leaders, a school superintendent, and a lawyer who was once a public school teacher and a school principal to discuss the implications of this mandate and what teachers and parents can expect. One of the goals is to learn from these experts, but we also want to allow some time for you to bring up questions and concerns about the mandate and other concerns you have. Each of our panelists is uniquely positioned to discuss how religion impacts public education in America. Tonight, we have Superintendent of Bixby Public Schools, Rob Miller, Dr. Negiel Bigpond, Rabbi Dan Kaiman, and Brent, Rowland. At the end of the webinar, attendees will have a chance to ask the panelists questions from the chat box. And I do just want to remind everybody that we are here to discuss something that is near and dear to all of us, which is children in public schools. And we do ask that everybody be respectful in your comments and in your questions to our panelists. And if we have any problems with anybody acting up on the webinar, I will have to bounce you. Sorry, but not sorry. So, okay, let's get into our introductions. I'm going to ask Superintendent Miller to go ahead and introduce himself.
Well, thank you, Colleen. I am Rob Miller, and it's an honor to be included on this panel tonight to discuss a very important topic to all of us, both personally and professionally. This is my 32nd year in public education, the last 7 of which has been as superintendent in Bixby Public Schools. For those of you who do not know where Bixby is, it's a suburb of Tulsa to the south and east. We have about 8,400 students, so that makes us the 16th largest school district in the state of Oklahoma. We're rapidly growing, have added over 2,000 students just in the last 6.5 years since I've been there. So it is a very progressive, forward-thinking school district. And I am honored every day and privileged to work with an incredible team of educators in providing the best education we possibly can to the students and families of Bixby, Oklahoma. So again, I look forward to the conversation tonight.
Thank you, Superintendent. Next, let's hear from Rabbi Kaiman.
Hi, Colleen, and hi, everybody. I'm glad to be with you all this evening. My name is Dan Kaiman. I'm a rabbi here at Congregation B'nai Emunah, the synagogue in Midtown Tulsa. I'm a product of public school myself, and as of last year, a parent of a student in the Tulsa Public Schools. I've always been interested in supporting public education long before I was a parent myself, as one of the cornerstone places for our kids to learn about democracy, about what it means to be a good citizen, what it means to grow and be a healthy and contributing member of our society. One of the things that we've done at the synagogue over the past couple of years, we're now in our second year, which is, I think, relevant to our conversation this evening, is we actually started a 5-day-a-week after-school program supporting 2 of our local public schools, where kids who are associated with the synagogue and who are connected to our community in one way or another come 5 days a week after their full day of public education for care, a safe space to process their day, supplemental education, and all of those good things we'd want to provide. So again, grateful to be in this conversation and look forward to talking more about the issues at hand.
Thank you, Rabbi. Okay, how about you, Brent?
I'm Brent Rowland. I am Education Justice Attorney at Oklahoma Appleseed. I'm very proud to be there. I am a Tulsan. Tulsa's been my home for most of my life. Like Rabbi Kaiman and like Superintendent Miller, I'm a proud product of our public schools and a proud graduate of the University of Tulsa for undergraduate and for law school. And I've also had a long career in education, over 20 years, teaching middle school, high school. I've taught undergrad and law school, but it all started off as a lawyer for legal aid before I ever got into the classroom. And so I've had the opportunity to return to a small firm, and that led me to the mission-driven work at Oklahoma Appleseed, which, again, I'm very proud of and very privileged to be part of.
Thanks, Brent. We're always so glad that you're here.
Thank you.
Okay, let's get into our first question, which is actually for you, Brent. So, Brent, can you explain what Ryan Walters is proposing regarding the Bible in public school classrooms, and what is the current legal landscape regarding Bibles in public schools?
That is a tough one because, and I just lost my notes. Hold on. Let me see if I can get those back up. Thanks for your patience. It's not really clear what all the proposal means, and I'm sure Superintendent Miller can attest to that. But there's clearly nothing new about using Bible in our public school classrooms. When I taught middle school English in Broken Arrow Public Schools, we read the Bible to compare the story of Noah and the flood from Genesis to the story of Utnapishtim and the flood from Gilgamesh. We read creation stories from native cultures, and we read the creation stories from Genesis. As a teacher, I was able to do that, understanding separation of church and state and understanding my role. I wasn't proselytizing or telling students what religion to believe. I was presenting the Bible as literature, which is one of the acceptable uses of Bible in public schools. I was concerned that I might be taking something sacred for so many students and potentially diminishing it by teaching it as literature alongside Gilgamesh. And I was concerned that I might be shaking the foundation of some students' faith by showing them that the biblical creation story is one of many creation stories from around the world. But I knew that providing students a world-class education also means preparing them to be world citizens and understand viewpoints other than their own. The Bible can already be used as an instructional resource for the State Department current social studies standards, for example. They came out in 2019. In particular, 7th grade world geography and high school world history both require students to learn about world religions. The Bible can be used as a learning resource in both of those classes, among others. At least one Tulsa County district offers a course in the Bible as literature, and I'm sure there are other courses that all across counties of Oklahoma where the Bible is included as a text. So it's clear that Walter's mandate is not breaking new ground. It's not bringing Bibles into the classroom for the first time. The Bible has been in Oklahoma public school classrooms and it remains there. There's a lot about the mandate that is not clear. On June 27th, as you said, Superintendent Walters sent district superintendents a memo, and it said, effective immediately, all Oklahoma schools are required to incorporate the Bible, which includes the 10 Commandments, as an instructional support into the curriculum across grades 5 through 12. The memo says the State Department of Education may supply teaching materials for the Bible as permissible to ensure uniformity in delivery. It's not clear how binding this really is on districts. The mandate isn't a change in standards. Oklahoma law sets out the process for adopting academic standards. It includes public input and final approval by our state legislature. That didn't happen. The standards haven't changed. It's not a mandate to use the Bible as a textbook. Oklahoma law gives local districts the exclusive power to determine the instruction, curriculum, instruction materials, and textbooks of its schools. The Oklahoma Attorney General's office has said, there is no legal authority for a memo from the superintendent to require content. When they got the June memo, district superintendents had to be wondering how to interpret it. Then on July 24th, there's another memo. This one was called Instructional Support Guidelines for Teachers, and it came from the State Department of Education. Its stated goal was to provide guidelines for teachers on how to incorporate the Bible to emphasize its historical, literary, and secular benefits and to ensure compliance with legal standards and precedents. Using the Bible for history, literature, and art sounds a lot like what's in the existing academic standards. So what's changed? The mandate also raises other questions. What version of the Bible is to be used? Well, that may not matter a lot to some Protestants. It can matter a lot to those people of Jewish or Catholic faith. Whereas the June memo said materials might come from the State Department, the July guidelines said that a physical copy of the Bible and 10 Commandments must be provided to every teacher in every classroom in the school district. No mention this time of the State Department providing the Bibles. Were district superintendents supposed to buy them? Superintendents likely know the Oklahoma Constitution forbids them to spend state funds on religious materials. So the mandate forces district superintendents and teachers into these dilemmas without clarity about how to resolve them or what implementation looks like. Our public school educators are being forced to choose between following the law as they know it or following Superintendent Walters' mandate. What does the law say? What are the legal standards and precedents which teachers must comply with? Well, the basis is in the separation of church and state found in the United States Constitution. Separation of church and state mattered to the constitutional framers. Many were Christians, but they also knew the history of Europe, where the church often controlled the state, and the history of England, where the state often controlled the church. The framers built separation of church and state into the Constitution first in Article 6, saying no religious test is required as qualification for any office. And then again in the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. During the Cold War of the late 1940s and 50s, when Americans were fighting communism with renewed religious fervor, school boards joined in by having public school students recite prayers or read scripture as part of their morning routine. Those cases were eventually brought to the Supreme Court. It ruled that public schools are government actors and that by leading students in prayer or scripture reading, they were influencing children who were required to be there, and in that way directly or indirectly establishing religion. Those Supreme Court rulings have often been misconstrued as removing God, Christianity, or prayer from public schools. But because of the First Amendment, schools also have to protect all students' practice of religion, including their right to pray and bring Bibles to school and meet as religious groups. As government employees, teachers can't lead students in prayer, but they can pray when students lead. Teachers are among the most conscientious people I have ever met. They want to do what's asked of them. They want to do what's best for all their students. In the case of the Bible mandate, Superintendent Walters has not made clear for superintendents and teachers what to do or how to do it. But they've heard for years from their district leaders and their school attorneys to respect separation of church and state. They're most likely to do now what they know and are trained to do, which is help students grow academically and make sure that in their classroom, every student knows they belong.
That was excellent, Brent. Thank you so much. I think
You are
that's
very welcome. Thank you.
it's such a good foundation for everything that we're going to talk about tonight. So, okay, I have one question I'm going to address to each panelist first, and then so I'm going to ask it, and then I'm going to follow up with specific questions for each of you after I ask this question. But it is, why is this issue important to you, and why does it matter for other Oklahomans? And I'm going to start with Superintendent Miller.
Well, thank you. And I agree, Brent, that was an outstanding synopsis of where we are and the existing case law and precedent involving religious studies in schools. And I want to say first is that, I am a firm believer that schools do have a role in teaching character and citizenship and helping to produce great young people to contribute to society. And so whether it be the Bible or other studies, I think it's important for us to look at creating well-rounded young citizens to enter the workforce. I think that benefits society and benefits all of us. I think where we are today with this particular mandate, it's very similar to some guidance we received last week, school districts, about the flag and about the Pledge of Allegiance. We're simply repeating something that's already existing in statute. Schools are already required by Oklahoma law to have a flag in front of our schools, to present the Pledge of Allegiance at least once a week, and we do it every day. But there was a lot of social media activity and interviews related to bringing the flag and the Pledge of Allegiance back to schools. It never left. It's always been here. And so the notion that we've taken the Bible or religion out of schools is also a false narrative. It's never been gone. And I walk through our schools every single day, and in particular at our secondary level, I see students with Bibles. I see students praying alone and together. And so again, we are not trying to take this out of school. We're simply trying to get some additional guidance so that we can comply to the degree that's acceptable within our schools, recognizing that that separation of religion and school is something that the majority of our parents want to see stay in place.
Thank you for that. I appreciate, I think that there's been sort of some misinformation, and I think it's really good to just get some clarification. So thank you for that. And some real world experience of what's happening in the halls of our public schools. So Rabbi Kaiman, same question for you. Why is this issue important to you, and why does it matter for other Oklahomans?
It's, I'm a rabbi. I spend my life in a synagogue. I actually work in a building where the 10 Commandments are already posted. So the value of Bible, Torah, as we call it as a Jewish community, and the 10 Commandments is clear and evident in the way I live my life. And in the community I work and try to shape. That being said, I also feel a strong need to protect religious freedom. And one of the best ways to protect religious freedom is by having and maintaining separation between church and state, or synagogue and state. Even in the way I just said, church and state, the way we frame this conversation is so imbued with some of the foundational religious underpinnings of the creation of this country. I think sometimes it gets lost what it might look and feel like to be a member of a diverse community, a member of a community that's holidays look different, or whose culture or background or style of observance or reading feels slightly different from the mainstream. Not that there is really ever a mainstream. And so I care about the issue because I want to live in a country and in a state and in a city that makes room for the diversity of opinion. I think actually that's one of the great strengths of our country. The fact that the purpose of public education is for it to be public education for all. And I see my job as a religious leader to be in that conversation. And so as I learned over the summer of Superintendent Walter's ideas about what should be taught, immediately it was something that I felt deserved my own attention and my community's attention. And so again, grateful we can continue to have these conversations because it really matters. And last but not least, these are our kids. This is our future. These are the people who we need to be investing in and creating a society that we want to continue to live in. And I see it in my own children. The learning environment we create for them will undoubtedly shape our future. And that's where I need to continue to be part of this conversation.
I so appreciate that. I did want to just clarify, we had a fourth panelist scheduled to be here tonight. It was Dr. Negiel Bigpond. He's one of the last remaining full-blood Yuchi citizens in the Yuchi tribe, and he's also an evangelist preacher. And the reason that we asked him to be here was to share his views on this topic. Also, I was really personally curious about his experience as someone who was raised in a Native American Christian boarding school, and how he felt about the experience of Native Americans being essentially having forced Christianity for a number of generations. Unfortunately, he's not been able to join the webinar yet just because of technical issues. So we'll keep looking for him and hopefully he can make it. But if he can't make it, that's what happened. That's why he's not here. So we're sad to miss his perspective. Okay, I'm going to go on to my next set of questions here. This is what we're calling round 2 of questions. And it's for Superintendent Miller. What was your reaction when you heard about the mandate, and what was your thought process in deciding to stay with the existing curriculum rather than implementing whatever changes Superintendent Walters is asking for?
For those of us who watch the state board meetings every month, those first few minutes have become, unfortunately, must-see TV, because that's when the state superintendent typically makes his big announcements or edicts. And so in this particular case, when he started talking about this mandate to have a Bible in every single classroom, my question as a superintendent immediately start going some of the trails that Brent went down. Which Bible, where are those Bibles going to come from? Since we are prohibited from using state dollars to purchase those. And then what do we do in those classrooms where a Bible's not aligned with any state standards? Because I will agree with the state superintendent that the Bible does have a role. As the others have said, there are historical, cultural references to the Bible and other religions as part of the study of history and world cultures. And that needs to be part of what we do in educating well-rounded students. I can also see connections, excuse me, to art, music, and literature, where it is relevant and appropriate to inject Bible into that. The question that we have asked multiple times without any clear guidance is, what does that look like in a kindergarten classroom or a 7th grade math classroom or a chemistry classroom? And other than the guidance that we received a month later on July 24th that aligns with, again, history, art, music, and literature, there's been no further discussion about how we're supposed to incorporate the study of the Bible in any of those other classes. And so part of my job as superintendent, honestly, is to help shield our teachers, our educators who are already overwhelmed with the things that they have to do in the classroom already, from distractions, or I'll just say it this way, idiocy of every stripe, to include my own. And my team and I, when we talk about new initiatives in our school district, are always very conscious of how these changes will affect our teachers and their workload and the expectations that we place on them every single day. And so when we got the guidance in late July that gave a little bit more information, but really not a lot more, we were having teachers who were reaching out saying, what am I supposed to do with this? You know, I'm going to have a Bible in my classroom. Am I going to be expected to teach from that? And I didn't have a good answer for that. So we did a deep dive into our Oklahoma academic standards, aligned any of those Bible references that came out in the memo, and recognized that we were already doing that. This was nothing new that the state superintendent had introduced, other than the expectation that it take place in all classrooms across the district. I tell this story. We had a high school chemistry position that was open most of the summer. And fortunately, we were able to find a teacher to fill that role late in July. But it never once occurred to me that I should go to some of my local churches and try and recruit a pastor to teach a couple sections of chemistry. Because again, that's not their role. They're not trained to be chemistry teachers, and I wouldn't expect them to step into a high school classroom and effectively teach that. To have the expectation that a teacher who may or may not have the same religious beliefs as the person, as the state superintendent or others, to teach the Bible in the way that they want it taught is an unrealistic expectation. And I'm sure as we talk through various examples of how one teacher may interpret a biblical lesson differently than another, and again, Brent alluded to this with some of his studies in literature. I, as a Christian myself, who raised my children as a Christian, would be pretty skeptical of how that might look in various classrooms. So again, my job as superintendent is to try and protect our teachers from distractions, let them focus on teaching the Oklahoma academic standards, build relationships with kids, provide a positive place for kids to learn and grow. And this seems to be a distraction on the ground level and really hasn't changed since we first heard about it a month and a half ago.
Yeah, I have one follow-up, which is you went on Elizabeth Vargas reports and you talked about protecting the religious freedom of all students in Oklahoma. And I just want to know, how do you see the Bible mandate as potentially a violation of those other students' religious freedom?
Well, as I've said before, I think it is important to respect the fact that we have students coming from all different religious backgrounds, and that includes Christian faiths. As I said, my children were raised Lutherans, and I remember one of our boys coming home from Vacation Bible School, and he had heard from an adult there at Vacation Bible School, which was held at a Baptist church, that his baptism was invalid. Because he was baptized in a Lutheran church, and that he would not be able to enter the kingdom of God because his baptism wasn't done appropriately. Well, for someone who was raised in the Lutheran family, and Catholics also believe in infant baptism, and that's half of the Christians worldwide, just illustrates that there are different interpretations of the Word of God, even within the Christian faith. And so we have to be really careful, and I'm sure the rabbi has another version of what that might look like, is that who's going to dictate what the appropriate interpretation is. And if I have a teacher, a 7th grade math teacher, for example, who is now required to have a Bible in his or her classroom, does that give them a free license to now teach from the Bible in ways that maybe parents wouldn't agree with or accept? And so it's a real slippery slope when we now expect and mandate that teachers teach from the Bible when we really don't have a clear agreement as to what that might look like from one classroom to the next.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to pause our planned questions because we have a question in the chat, and I have notification anxiety and it keeps telling me I have one notification. So I'm going to read you guys this question. Whoever wants to address it, any of the three of you or all three of you, I'd like to hear your thoughts. So the question's from Anonymous. Hi, Anonymous. It says, So does this just amount to hot air? Is he trying to rile up people who are misinformed about what is currently allowed? It sounds to me like the Bible is pretty much allowed as a teaching tool already, but you are not allowed to require students to pray or proselytize to students.
Well, I guess I can touch on that and then let the other gentleman touch on it as well. It's hard to know, and I hate to speculate on other people's intentions or motivations. I do believe that he is a faithful man and believes that this is a direction that schools should go. And I don't find that to be negative, other than the implications associated with that. He doesn't have the authority to implement this change in schools. The Oklahoma Supreme Court was unanimous in their decision in June on a somewhat similar situation with Edmond Public Schools and library books, that the state superintendent does not have the authority to make curricular decisions for local school districts. So again, if my Board of Education, if my community, my parents were strongly advocating for these kind of changes in our school district, then we'd have to sit down and consider that and look at what the implications would be. But right now, like I said, I'm starting my 7th year as superintendent here in Bixby, and up until this latest mandate, I had not one parent in all those years reach out to me and say that we needed more religion in our schools. And in fact, since this announcement came out, I've had scores of parents saying to hold our ground and to support the separation of our schools and religion. They don't want to see teachers teaching the Bible in our schools. They would prefer to do that in their homes and in their churches or synagogues.
Absolutely. Anybody else want to address the question in the chat?
I think I would reiterate part of what Superintendent Miller said, which is we don't want to impute bad motives to anybody. What comes to mind is that Superintendent Walters knows how our state standards are adopted. He knows that he doesn't have unilateral authority to adopt those new state standards, so it can't be that. He knows how textbooks are adopted. This isn't that. That's in the local school control. The Superintendent Miller said our state Supreme Court just reinforced that with a decision that came down in June involving Edmond schools. And so that does call into question what the motives are, even though, we don't want to impute that. It also brings to mind the idea that when somebody's world feels rocked, when it feels like there's a cultural upheaval, then I think people want sometimes answers that can be overly simplified. And I don't know, but perhaps that's this, is if we could just put a Bible in the classroom. When I think often real solutions are a lot more difficult. I would say that's even true of faith. I think I just from speaking with Superintendent Miller and from Rabbi Kaiman, to the extent that we have, I think any of us would say that if you're on a journey of faith, there is a lot more done in your soul searching and in your discovery and in the hard work you do internally than could possibly ever happen in your life from somebody handing a book or saying, memorize this. It's just not that simple. And so I think those are bigger questions to wrestle with that just that go outside of the school, but that maybe offer some insight into what's really going on here.
Rabbi, I saw you on mute, but I didn't know if Brent took care of your comments too.
All good.
Okay, great. So this goes to you, Rabbi. There are undeniably political aspects to Walter's mandate, and it has emphasized some political divisions. But politics aside, if the mandate were acted on as proposed, what does it say to students about their faith, whether it's Jewish or Christian or whatever their faith may be?
An interesting question. Anyone who's studied the Bible knows that the Bible is a document which is ripe for interpretation and which has been obsessed over by people generation after generation after generation. And so the first question that Superintendent Miller already asked, and that Brent also posed, is what text are we teaching? If this is to what we teach, then how does that look, and how do we even might one even present that material? For example, in the Jewish tradition, we study the text in its original Hebrew. The Hebrew as represented in the Torah text, it comes without vowels and without punctuation, which leaves open many avenues for interpretation, both in translation, but also in segmenting out different parts of the text. So let's take, forgive me, but I'll do a little Torah study with us all. Let's take the 10 Commandments, for example. That would seem to most of us, you might say, oh, well, that's 10. That's easy. We'll start there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We know we can teach that in our public schools, but how we count those 10 is actually different based off of a variety of religious traditions. I point you to the Wikipedia article on the 10 Commandments, where there's a beautiful, colorful chart that outlines what I'm about to go over. But in the Talmud, for example, based off of, let's take the first commandment or the first two commandments, or the first 2 commandments. In the Talmud, I am the Lord your God. That's verses 1 and 2 of the book of Exodus. That represents the first commandment. And then the second commandment is, you shall have no other gods before me, and don't make unto thee any graven images. I'm reading the King James translation, although it's a little foreign to me as a text that I use. So that's how the first 2 commandments are delineated in my tradition. However, in the Christian tradition, those 3 ideas are combined into the first commandment. So already we're only at number 2, and we're out of sync with one another, which is okay. That's the diversity of the country and the religious world we live in. But we're dealing with a level of complexity and nuance and diversity that feels to me well beyond the responsibility of that chemistry teacher or our kindergarten teachers, or really most of the education that's necessary in our public schools. We've got a large uphill battle in our public schools already. We've got a lot of work to be done, and I see it every day in the experience of my own kid. So I know the immense challenges that our educators are facing and that our school system is facing. And I have to imagine there is a better way to deploy religion as a resource and an agent of support for our public education than to impose a set of ideas from the outside in. There is a danger to putting the Bible or the 10 Commandments in our classrooms. The danger is it takes the experience of someone who might already feel like other and make them feel even further like another. And I don't know how much that serves any part of our society. Here's a personal example that I can speak of. We might think of the Bible mandate conversation as new and fresh and the moment we find ourselves in. But I went to public school in North Florida. I don't know, another notch on the Bible Belt, however you might describe it, Pensacola. And I remember a very formative moment of my own public school education where all the evangelical churches in Pensacola decided that every public school student needed to receive a Bible. I was one of 3 Jewish students in my public school. One was my cousin and one was my best friend. And we had to decide how we would enter our school when pastors and volunteers, well-meaning, well-intentioned, were standing at the front door putting their religious texts in my hands. I had to think as a sixth grader about how I would frame out my own religious identity relative to the identity being presented to me. That feels like conversations that are really best left to our religious communities, that are really best left to our religious leaders and to our families themselves, who have every right to shape the value set that that informs the life and experience their kids grow into.
That's such a sad feeling when you told that story of going in and also, aren't you thinking, how am I going to explain this to my parents too? Like, I know they're going to be upset.
Yeah, my parents are pretty understanding, but I mean, but you are thinking, how do I explain this to my friends? Like, do I want to? I mean, we've all been middle schoolers, or many of us have been middle schoolers before. That's a world of social acceptance. Anything you do that makes you a little bit different makes you a lot different.
Yeah.
And when you put that into the educational systems that we create, which, by the way, it's okay for parochial schools to exist. It's okay for there to be environments where religion is taught. I work in a place where we teach religion. I'm not against those ideas. But I do think when we are thinking about crafting what public education looks like, we need to use a lens of inclusivity. We need to use a lens that thinks through the dynamics at play. And we're about to come up on the high holiday season here in Oklahoma, a period of in the Jewish world, and it's a period of intense introspection and intense involvement in Jewish life. And because of the nuances of our calendar, the Jewish calendar, many of those holidays happen in the middle of the week. Family observing those holidays has to confront the difficult choice of, do they send their kid to school or do they pull their kid out of school, already based off of the structures at play. And that's okay. We're not asking for the calendars of Bixby Public Schools to be changed. But the idea that we would further distinguish differences amongst our kids as they exist already, that seems to me as something that is positioned to do more harm than good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tough to be a middle schooler.
It is.
Superintendent Miller, we have a question about your child's experience. So Preston says it's horrifying that an adult would tell a child that their baptism wasn't valid. Do you think that is the expectation of the State Department of Ed? You're muted.
You think after all these years of Zoom, I would have figured that out by now. No, I would hate to attribute any motivation again to that. But I told that story to really illustrate the differences in interpretation from even one Christian denomination to another. So when people have asked the state superintendent, what Bible would you want to have in schools? And the answer is the most historically accurate one. Well, is that the Torah? Is that, I don't know which one is the most historically accurate, because I wasn't there and none of us were. And so that's based on our own individual faith journey, our own interpretation of religious texts as to which one we believe would be the most accurate. And so I do think that our parents, our families are conscious of that. And if they're raising their child under one set of beliefs, the last thing they want to hear from another adult, whether that's somebody at Vacation Bible School or at school, is something that contradicts that point of view in a way that causes their child to feel lose faith in their own beliefs about their religion. Now, I'm all about creating open-minded critical thinkers. And I think as students mature, certainly into high school and college, the exploration of different points of view is critically important to better understand where we each come from and where those beliefs are. In fact, I think sometimes hearing information that contradicts our own worldview is beneficial. It helps us understand other people's point of view, and sometimes that solidifies our beliefs because you hear it and somebody articulates it in a clear, convincing way, but you still say, no, I believe what I believe. And I think that's how our faith gets stronger over time, is by being open to hearing what other faiths or perspectives are. And so I didn't take it that way. I didn't get all riled up. I simply sat down with my son and explained to him that our belief system was that infant baptism was the way it was set up to be, and that he was fine. And again, he was 10 years old. He worked his way through that, but for a short period of time, it did cause some concern on his part. But we also have conversations as they became teenagers and went through confirmation. That is where we saw that really accepting the faith as yourself and being independent, and not just accepting God in the way my parents want me to, but accepting God because that faith is in my own heart and I feel the Holy Spirit working in me. That's the progression we went with our students, or with our children who were raised in a Lutheran faith.
Colleen, could I kind of piggyback on that and backtrack a little bit? Because I think we missed a teachable moment in terms of talking about the intention behind the mandate. I don't want to understate it. While I appreciate where Superintendent Miller's coming from, and I meant it when I said we don't impute bad motives to other people, I do think it's a critically important question that we can't let go of, and that we have to keep asking until we have answers that satisfy each of us. And here's why: because there's a pattern of this kind of action in our public schools that's going on, particularly in the South, as Rabbi Kaiman said, our Bible Belt. If you look at the 10 Commandments in Louisiana that are required to be posted, and one of the big debates there was, what version do we post? And the state came up with a version that those schools have to post. That may be on hold now because of legal action against the state, but that happened in Louisiana. In Texas, they have recently included new curriculum that includes, I don't know how else you would say it except Bible lessons. And on the surface, the purpose of those Bible lessons isn't to proselytize. It's not to present those stories as a religious truth. But it's often hard to tell the difference when you are reading as a child. And as adults, we do have to look really critically at that kind of action. Those actions in different states aren't coincidental. They are concerted. We are part of that. I think it's absolutely fair to say. And I see a question from David Blatt that says, Brent, do you think that the Bible mandate would be subject to a legal challenge? I absolutely do. And I can say more about that. But the point being that there are forces at work. There are foundations and very well-funded organizations that have their hands in every state. I think the ones that I mentioned just happen to be more susceptible because they are Bible Belt states to the action that they seek to, take and whatever it is they want to do to our public schools for whatever reason. But that's an important point that we all have to be aware of. We have to keep looking for those answers, and we have to be aware when we talk about local control. And when we see ads on TV about whatever candidate or whatever, that there's a lot of big money behind a lot of what's represented for whatever reason.
Thank you for that. I have,
Oh,
sorry.
I'm sorry, Colleen. I just want to commend Brent again for saying that clearly. I, of course, want to play nice. There's kind of some ongoing friction between Bixby schools and the State Department. So I always want to walk a fine line in not being critical, but also being forceful in standing up for the rights of my school district and my students and families. And so that's kind of where I draw the line, and trying to not make it personal, but making it professional and making decisions that are really for the best interests of our community.
Thank you for saying that. So we have the chat, or the Q&A is popping off. I do have one more question for you guys that I'd love for you to address as short or as long as you want, and then we'll go and answer a lot of these questions that people are typing in. So I loved this question, so I couldn't leave it on the side of the road. It's if the separation of church and state was put to a vote in America today, how would you campaign for it or against it? And is it good or bad that we have people that we as a people are stuck with it? I want to hear from, Pastor Bigpond, you made it. Hi.
Oh,
Thank you so
yeah,
much
finally made it.
here.
Welcome, Pastor Bigpond.
Hello, hello, hello. Greetings.
Well, if it's okay with you guys, I'd like to go back to my questions that were for you, Dr. Bigpond. And if you want to do a short introduction, we have a few minutes for that, and then I'll go into my questions that I had written for you. So welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. It's good to be on here.
Do you want to tell folks who you are?
Well, I'm Dr. Negiel Bigpond. I'm pastor in Morningstar Evangelistic Center, and I'm with the Two Rivers Native American Training Center, and I'm here in Oklahoma, and been in ministry for 40-some years, I think, maybe more. And I just enjoy praying and enjoy trying to get this country in shape and this state of Oklahoma, land of the red man. So, but yeah, I'm honored to be on the Zoom call tonight, and anything I can add, I'll certainly do so as much as I can, and whatever. And I'm anticipating hearing good things tonight.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation. So I wanted to ask you just generally, what are your thoughts on Superintendent Walters asking public school superintendents to incorporate the Bible into their daily classes at their public schools here in Oklahoma?
You know, I wish I had a better understanding, maybe it's already out there and I just missed it, how that's going to be accomplished. From teachers or superintendents or whoever in the school system, how are they going to do that? I can go back in time of my upbringing in school and how we used to pray and read the scripture, and that was basically it. But as far as being taught, the scriptures are being taught about the Bible. I don't think we ever did that, but we did pray in classroom before the teacher would pray, and some of us would read the scripture, and then we'd start our day, and that was about the extent of it. But as far as her or anybody teaching us about the Bible, that was at that time was left up to the church. So I'm not totally understanding, I guess, how that's going to look in this day and time. Is the teacher going to teach the Bible, take 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or whatever, to teach the Bible or teach a scripture about a scripture? I mean, I don't have any problem with that if the teacher has the ability and they're understanding themselves to do that. If they understand the scriptures, if they understand, but you and I know that not every teacher knows the Lord as their Savior. And I don't know at what perspective or what ability they have to teach that in that way. So I guess I need to have a better understanding. Maybe that's been talked about and I missed it.
Well, we've kind of all decided we don't know exactly how it's going to work yet, and that's kind of part of the problem with it. But I did want to ask you about the question we talked about last week when we did our practice session, which is, your perspective as a Native American man and as a UT man on the idea of forcing any type of religion on Native American students and looking at that through a historical lens of how Native peoples have had a lot of Christianity kind of put on them in different ways by both the federal government and state governments. And I
Mhm.
liked your answer that you gave last week, so I wanted to see if you would say it again.
Well, we always knew God, and I'm not sure all the Native children realize that. Students would realize that. Me as an elder, with as I said last time, in our language, we have the word God, we have spirituality, we have our concept of God, the creator, the great creator, in our language. So it's not that we are, I think it's a misnomer that's saying that we're heathens, that we never knew God. I'm one that would say we always knew God, maybe not to the perspective of the Christian people at that time, but we knew there was a God. We knew there was a creator. The Jesus, the Christ, maybe not so much. Maybe did not have a total understanding of Christ. God, the creator, yes. Spirituality, yes. But to go beyond that into your day's understanding of the Christ, maybe not. I'm not going to say we did. I'm not going to say we did, because we do have a name for his son, Yeshua, or Jesus the Christ, that we have in our language. So I'm not going to say it totally is out of the picture, or Christ is out of the picture. Bible, no, we didn't have the Bible, of course. We didn't have the English terms or the English understanding of the Bible at that time. But God, the creator, yes. We called Jesus at that time is the great overcomer in that perspective. And so that's the reason I'm hoping that many of the Native children would understand that, or would have the understanding that. Now, whether they will or not, because some of our people don't have that understanding that I just gave you. I don't know why they should. Most of the tribe should know that, and most of the tribes I know have the understanding of God. I really couldn't say that. Say Oklahoma, the 39 tribes. Okay, I could not say the 39 tribes all knew Yeshua the Christ, but I think I can say they all knew God the Creator. And they have that understanding. There was a creator. He was the Father of all. He was the God of all. That I believe I could. Now, whether they believe it today, I can't say that. But I know that our people, their elders, knew that. Whether the young ones today, the younger generation, still holds on to that, I could not say that.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The question I asked right before we saw Dr. Bigpond on is about if the separation of church and state was put to a vote in America today, how would you campaign for or against it? And is it good or bad that we as a people are stuck with it? And I'm going to start with Rabbi Kaiman for that one.
I think the involvement of government in religious action never leads to good outcomes. And so I don't know. I'm no political hack to design a campaign idea, but I would simply begin and end with the idea of the dangers of government mandating how people act and more than act, how people believe. I don't know about you, but my opinion changes from 1 minute to the next. And my worldview makes room for lots of thoughts about how to engage healthily in society. I don't think another person has to be wrong for me to be right. And I think that's only really possible in a world where we uphold the separation of church and state. The founders of this country came here for religious freedom, because of the dangers of consolidating power amongst religious authority. We see it in countries all over the world. People who are fleeing persecution because of the experience of being a religious minority. Here at the synagogue, we run a refugee resettlement agency, which means we work with individuals from all over the country who are relocating as refugees to the United States. They are qualified as refugees and are coming in. One of the largest populations of refugees we serve in Oklahoma. I think some of you, maybe many of you know, are people from Burma, Myanmar, who are fleeing religious persecution. We are a country where someone should be able to come and be who they are, however they are, and have freedom of expression of that religion, but that the government does not make it its business to be teaching our children what those belief sets are and should be. So I don't know if that's much of a campaign slogan, but that's how I would frame my conversation on this issue.
Thank you. So we have I think it's just more of a comment from Stephanie, who's a very learned person. So thank you for being here, Stephanie. But she says about how we should get the Bibles. Our admin sent out a survey asking if we would provide a Bible ourselves, wanted someone else to provide one. The Ministerial Alliance has volunteered to provide Bibles for those who want one or did not want one at all. This was based on the Oklahoma State School Board Association's legal opinion that this is an instruction which means an instruction AID, which means not everyone might want to include it in their curriculum. So that seems to suggest that maybe things are optional. And then the next question is, with Oklahoma having one of the lowest school testing scores, how much of the mandates are a form of diverting the focus away from the 3 R's, writing, reading, and arithmetic? And how do we as citizens get the focus back on basic education? This is our future. I bet Brent has something to say about that. So I'm going to kick it to him.
I do. Jeffrey's question makes me think, first of all, of local control and the importance of that. And that is, I think one of the answers there is there's not local control over everything, but there's a lot of local control about how schools are run, as there should be. And I'm glad to hear the concern that Jeffrey has and that so many of our fellow Oklahomans have about the quality of our schools. The president of the University of Oklahoma said the same. It's harder to get academics to teach at the university and to do research at the university at the level he's seeking when they feel like Oklahoma schools are being kind of made into a stage to play out somebody else's drama on. So yes, those are areas we need to really improve. We know that recruiting teachers is an area where we really need to improve. We continue to have teacher shortages. You can imagine how difficult it is for students who want to go to college, who are trying to learn advanced math, but that don't have qualified people in front of the classroom to do that. But it also makes me think about the importance of democracy in all that. You know, what do we really believe about our public schools? And if we really believe that one of the purposes of our public schools is to educate for democracy, of course we need to get back to the 3 R's, but even more to the critical thinking that Superintendent Miller talked about, and to principles like, yes, the majority rules, but there's also a place for minority rights. And we really embrace the pluralism that seems to threaten some of our decision makers at this point. And I think Rabbi Kaiman alluded to that as well. It's similar to a question that somebody else asked, which said, what do we do? There are moments in our society when we feel helpless, and this may be one of those moments. November's coming. That's a big one. We exercise our right to vote. We exercised our right to vote as Tulsans last week. We participate in board meetings. And all of those, I think, are a way to say we hold folks accountable. We hold our State Board of Education. We hold our state superintendent accountable. In terms of accountability for someone like our state superintendent, we have some representatives that are very near to us, your state senator, your state house member, and they do listen to you. Sometimes it takes a lot of voices to sway their opinion, but they do listen to you. And so we talk to them, and those are ways to let your voice be heard and get back to the idea of this is not what we want. What we want is the best for all of our kids across Oklahoma for their future.
Absolutely, Brent. You have one more question from Erica. She is asking, do you think this mandate could potentially violate HB 1775, making a child feel, quote, bad for practicing religion that is a minority view in their local classroom? Or does HB 1775 only address topics of race and sexual orientation?
Well, this will be a short one. Thanks, Erica, for the question. I looked it up while we were talking just to make sure. And yes, House Bill 1775 just applies to race and gender. So it would not apply to religion.
Thank you.
Although, Brent, I could gently counter, I could see a situation in which the Bible was, because again, if we want to look at the unfortunate truth is that some have used the Bible to justify bad behavior in the past, to include slavery. And so if that were brought up in a history class, how some slave owners back in the Civil War used the Bible to justify their actions in holding other human beings as property, because it was also included in the Bible, I think that would have the effect of causing some people to feel badly about maybe their religion or about their race.
And I think that is excellent evidence of how, to help Dr. Bigpond catch up with our previous conversation of how unclear this whole thing is that what the intent is for it to be used like that? What is the intent? And it's just unclear. So thanks for making that, for bringing that up, Rob.
Let's also not forget that the Bible mentions explicitly the ben soreru mare, what to do with a stubborn and rebellious child. Anyone got this one? Stone them to death. I don't think we probably want to be doing that as punishment in our schools.
No, thank you to that. Okay, we have a quick comment, which is that after listening to what you all are saying, it seems clear that the reason for Walters's mandate is for promoting his own political aspiration and is putting the entire state into a state of chaos. I will speak for myself as an executive director of a legal nonprofit. We run around like chickens with our heads cut off, trying to analyze the legal realities of all the things that Superintendent Walters is trying to put out into the world daily and weekly. It seems like he stays up late thinking of ways to make us run around. So I will agree that the state of chaos is true. Okay, next question. I'm going to save the Project 2025 question for a little later. Superintendent Miller, you mentioned that the state funds cannot be used to purchase Bibles. If it is mandated officially, would that change? Can it be used for those subjects it's already a resource for, like social studies, now? And does the intent of the resource matter? Would it apply to other religious texts?
You could get various legal opinions on this particular question. I think if you're purchasing Bibles for the purpose of a Bible or religious studies class as an elective, I think it would be appropriate to use state funds to purchase those religious texts as part of that curriculum. I do think there would be a problem with purchasing Bibles to use in a 7th grade math classroom where you couldn't align those with specific academic standards. I think then you're really stretching. The Oklahoma Constitution has a portion called the Blaine Amendment that sets forth very clear guidance as to how schools or other government entities can use taxpayer dollars for religious materials. And I believe that's still the precedent here in the state of Oklahoma. I haven't seen anything that would modify or adjust that. But really on the whole topic of physical Bibles, we've done away with physical textbooks for the vast majority of our classes, particularly in high school. The kids access their textbooks through their device, their Chromebook or their iPad. And the vast majority of students who come to school have access to a Bible or other religious texts or all sorts of materials through the device that they're carrying with them. It's 2024, and the idea that we have to have physical texts in order to meet a mandate is kind of old-fashioned.
True. Okay. Got that one. You got another question, Superintendent, and then I'm going to go to Dr. Bigpond. So this one says, given your stance on not directly teaching the Bible in any way that falls outside of historical significance or on literature, what would be your stance if a teacher in your district was called to teach the Bible in the way that Superintendent Walters initially framed in his memo? Would it be easy for a teacher who wanted to evangelize to claim they are allowed to do so because of the memo from this summer?
I think we've just seen an example of that in a school district north of Tulsa. I won't mention them specifically, where a teacher presented a lesson in history class that was a little bit over the line in terms of asking kids for their religious perspectives or feelings about various issues that parents didn't agree with. I think that danger is very real in that we would have some teachers use this as a license to now try and indoctrinate or push a particular religious point of view that we would have to manage. And we're very careful. We want to be as inclusive as we possibly can be in our school districts so that our teachers are teaching the academic standards for their course and not adding a lot of editorial to that. And I think it's best when a teacher can teach a history course and the kids at the end of that course have no idea what religion or political persuasion that teacher may be, that they've done a good job of balancing, presenting both points of view or multiple points of view, and not indoctrinating a particular point of view.
Nice. Okay, Dr. Bigpond, one from Leslie. Does it give you or your fellow pastors pause that any kind of mandate requiring teaching of the Word of God in non-religious schools or public schools is invading the province of the church? Does it cheapen the church's rightful place in our society?
Well, it depends on if you're just speaking, if you're trying to go beyond. Well, let me put it this way. Where you're going to your beliefs, say from your church, whether it's Methodist, Baptist, whatever, Charismatic, Pentecost, whatever. If you come from that perspective, I think you really tend to ask for problems, because even the adults that's not in school have problems with that somewhat from their beliefs, from whatever they was raised, a Baptist or Methodist, whatever the case may be. And also we got to look at where is this to be taught. So you're going to set aside a certain time to teach this for an hour or whatever the case may be. Where is that going to be taught at? And we take that time to do so. You're you tend to, I think it's going to be looked at. Well, I think the Awasa school system not long ago with a young lady that was, I think, was homosexual, and how that played out and how it was looked at and created riots and all this, and the whole school system got involved in it because of there were those that were against it, there were those for it, and that's what you're going to have here. There's going to be those for it and those against it. Christianity, God, the beliefs. You're going to have both sides coming at it, and I think until we get an answer of how is this going to be done, is the teacher themselves going to teach that, or do we have certain people, clergy? And I think that's the only way you could do it. I don't know if I'd want a teacher to teach that. I would want a clergy to be called into that perspective and begin to teach it because of their background, because of their learning, because of their ability to do so. But to ask the teacher that may or may not know anything about it, and it's totally against their beliefs to do that, I don't know that you could do that. I mean, I don't think it would set right. I think you would get to create more problems than you would do any good at all.
Yeah.
Dr. Bigpond, can I just respond briefly?
Yeah.
I would actually say, even if it was someone who was qualified, a rabbi or a preacher or someone literate in text, I would still imagine it being difficult to use the form of public education for the teaching of religious text in a religious way, as Superintendent Miller describes, and Brent earlier as well. The use of these documents for perspective, for literature, for all of those makes a lot of sense to me. But as a rabbi, I would not feel comfortable being asked to come in and a religious person into a public school environment and teach in such a way that offers directive about how the text should be interpreted. So I just want to offer that as a nuance, and maybe a difference between the way we think about this, which I really respect.
Well, I totally understand that. I understand that. It's not 100% either way.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's going to create some difficulties there. Even like you said, even if you go have a minister to come in and do that, what are we doing? Having church?
Yeah, there you
go. I just don't. If we go back into my time when I was in school, I didn't see any problem with it because it wasn't taught. I mean, it wasn't taught. Yes, we prayed, and yes, we read the scripture, and that was it. Then we went on and had our day. But as far as the teacher teaching me about, Revelations or Genesis or whatever, no, that didn't happen. So I think either way, it's going to play out. It's going to be there.
Okay, I'm gonna save everyone on the panel from having to answer the question about Project 2025 because I'm gonna answer it really quickly. So Project 2025 is this big buzzword right now. There is a document online that you can read. I think it's about 900 pages. We have a blog coming out shortly from our research director, David Blatt, about the education portion of Project 2025 and what they're proposing. It is a series of policy proposals that is coming. I would characterize it from those on the far right, and it's been alleged to be part of President Trump's campaign. He denies that. We're kind of going back and forth about that. It is also called white Christian nationalism. And there are groups in this country that are working to try to, surface that and speak about that. I think it's something that we should all be on the watch for, like what Brent was saying earlier. These are very well-funded groups. They're groups that are putting a lot of money into state politics for the purpose of eliminating the wall between church and state, for the purpose of doing a lot of the things that we're seeing happening right now. And I think as citizens of America, which was founded on the separation of church and state, it should be very near and dear to all of us so that we can continue to practice the freedom of all of our religions, as we've talked about tonight. So I'm going to give a little closer to each of the panelists. I can't get to all the questions. I love you guys putting so much activity in the Q&A so much. Sorry I won't get to answer all of them. But here's your closing question, and we'll start with Brent. What guidance would you give to families or classroom teachers who are having strong feelings one way or the other about the Bible mandate?
Yeah, and that is very much like a question. I'm watching that feed too, that Crystal Clark-Wiles asked about. Aside from voting, what do we do to protect our children? And I'm really anxious to hear what our other panelists have to say about that too. But I do think a lot of it, it's not just voting, but it is involvement. I think it's conversations with your child, what's happening in school, looking at assignments, knowing what they're about, knowing their teacher. I think sometimes parents think that once children are out of elementary school, they need to be a little bit more hands-off. I would take exception to that. I think certainly through middle school, parents need to be very hands-on. Middle school teachers and administrators are likely to welcome that. So know what goes on in school, know what's taught, have conversations with your children. Do check their backpacks for homework. Sometimes they say that they don't have homework when they really do. That's a little aside.
Sure.
But I think those are important. Know your school board members. And this is one of the hardest things, I think. Voting can be challenging, but that's something we can do anonymously. Trying to build a relationship with a legislator or with a school board member is a little bit more challenging, but I really believe elected officials value that. And so it would probably be worth a coffee to have that kind of connection with them where you can have a conversation about these things so that they know how you feel and you know how they feel, and just being very aware of what's going on with your child and at their school.
Superintendent Miller, same question.
Well, when I hear the state superintendent bring up these mandates and things like these, it causes me to believe that he's just disconnected from what's really happening in our school districts and with our families. Again, my families aren't reaching out to me saying that we need more religion in the classroom. What they're saying is we need more caring, competent, high quality teachers in front of our kids. And that is the number one issue affecting Oklahoma schools right now. And all of our efforts should be focused on how do we rebuild the pipeline of qualified educators? How do we train and retain and make our public schools a place where young people want to come and teach and be part of a purpose that can change lives? And right now, these things distract from that. And they cause teachers to be unduly stressed and anxious about their role, when really what we need to remind them all the time is how valuable and important their job is. And we need to do everything we can to bolster the education profession in our state. And again, that's what I believe our state superintendent should really focus on.
Thank you. Pastor Bigpond, Dr. Bigpond, apologies.
Well, I totally agree with what's been said. One thing I would like to say biblically about the Bible: do not step aside for anything. And I think as far as Oklahoma, that has happened. We stepped aside biblically. Those that are believers have kind of stepped aside and said, okay, just have your way and I won't create any problems. And as we see today, this has brought some problems in. But you're going to have problems. as I said, I don't think it should have ever left. A prayer, we had the prayer in school and all that, and had problems with that. No prayers, no this, no that, no huddling together in a hallway or anywhere and praying or anything like that. It just created problems. So I think biblically, as men and women of God, we need to create problems in a good way, not in a vast fighting and that type of way, but let people know the Bible still exists. Let people know there are godly people still yet. Let people know my child is a born again Christian. Let people know that they believe in God. Don't ever let that go away. Don't let that, regardless who says it, just don't give them any leeway that there are men and women, there's children that love the Lord in this nation, in this state. Don't ever let that go away. And I think we did that to a certain extent. We just kind of discounted it, kind of stepped away from it, never did say much about it. Maybe in the beginning we did, but then we just kind of floated out of the picture. So I think I like a good fight, and this is a good fight. This is a good battle, and there people are saying things about it. They're stepping up to the plate. Some are afraid of it, and that's understandable, as far as their children goes and the grandchildren goes, and that's understandable. But the fight is there, but don't ever let biblical principles, as Oklahoma has in the past, just let it drift away. We need to get back to stand true to what we really believe, as far as biblically. I'm not trying to say we need to force things down people's throat, but let us stand. Let us stand. We as born again people, let us stand. And I'm speaking from a native perspective. I would have to deal this with my own people. Let us stand together with this. Or you're going to be separate. You're going to be pushed away separately. And you're going to be this and you're going to be that. Let us all stand together as one, biblically, and just be strong in it. Just be strong. I don't know the end results here. I'm not understand it totally, but I think we can all stand together, though.
Thank you so much for that. Rabbi Kaiman, same question. Any advice for families or classroom teachers in today's environment?
Sure. I work at the synagogue. We're a big building at the corner of 17th and Peoria. And I'm actually sitting in my office right now. We've got a preschool for 150 kids. We've got a refugee resettlement agency that operates out of this building, 300 clients a year in one capacity or another. We've got a congregation that gathers here. We've got a 5-day-a-week after-school program. There's a lot happening in this building. One of the things that means is it means we actually have to care for the facility. We have to take the trash out. We have to make sure that our floors are clean every night. We have a crew of people who help us do this work. And over the years, I've been here for 12 years, I try and build relationships with the people who clean our building. Last year, we had a new person arrive, helping out a couple of nights a week. Introduced myself because I'm always here late at night. Don't tell security. No, I'm not always here late at night, but I'm sometimes here late at night doing the work of a community leader. And I introduced myself and got to talking about his day to this person who was actually taking the trash out of my office, the desk right behind me. I said, well, what do you do? And he teaches history at a Tulsa public school. And he's been doing it as a career educator. And our job and the work we do that we offer is fairly compensated and good work and meaningful, and he needs that work in order to keep himself going. But my heart absolutely broke when I learned this fact about this person who is spending their life in the classroom with our kids, shaping the next generation, and that at night he's not grading papers, he's taking out these papers. That's a big challenge for our society. That's much bigger than the worry about what Bible is going to be taught and whether the Ten Commandments are on the wall or not. That's what I'm really focused on when I think about the work we need to be addressing in our public school system. I agree with Superintendent Miller. We need to rebuild our pipeline of qualified educators, and we need to compensate them more than fairly so that they can really dedicate themselves to the work of shaping the next generation. I don't know what to do about all these distractions, except to say that we do have power. We have power to create initiatives within our own communities that can shift what after-school care looks like for our public school kids. We also have the power to build relationships with the people who are in our schools. We can schedule meetings, hopefully, with our school leaders. We can schedule meetings, certainly, with our kids' teachers. We have to do that. We have to do that all the time, and we have to stay very focused on building, not getting distracted by this stuff, and building the society we want to be a part of, and that we need to have protected for the next generation.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Well, we cannot tell you all how much we appreciate hearing from you about a topic that impacts all of us. A recording of this webinar will be available on advanceokkids.org for anyone who wants to reference it again or share it. If you want to be involved or just want to learn more about Advance Oklahoma's kids, please visit advanceokkids.org and follow us on social media at AdvanceOKKids. We hold webinars and in-person town halls throughout the year to engage our communities in creating a thriving public education system for Oklahoma's kids. Thank you so much for your time this evening, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Bye, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you, panelists.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all for organizing, attending. Thank you.
Yes.